But you probably need to speak to EA about that sort of thing, because that's a little bit outside my comfort zone in terms of analysis or telemetry that they use.
And I've spoken to them a little bit, and I'm talking to the Bionas. Well, I'm hoping to talk to the Bionas Foundation. I've been pursuing them. Just a couple of clarifications for me. The Clun, I was just looking at the map on the wall behind you. So does it actually rise at about anchor?
It rises at anchor, yeah.
So none of it's in Wales?
None of it's only about 300 or 400 metres from Wales, though.
Okay. So there's no involvement with the NRW or anybody like that?
Not for the Clun, but there is for the team. Because we're also involved in teamwork.
The team rises.
Pardon the pun. The team rises at Kilfeisty Hill.
Yeah.
But it is the border of the AUMB, pretty much.
Yeah, okay. And then the other thing I just wanted to clarify was the pearl mussel, and I should know this, but what it doesn't like is partly it's the phosphates, but it's also the silt as well. Is it known what the issues, precisely what the issues are, and which is worse? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a pearl mussel, you need very, very high quality water. We're talking water that's better than comes out the tap. So in terms of the background levels, in terms of phosphates and nitrates, they have to be at natural levels. And this is where we come back to this term oligotrophic. Very, very low in nutrients. The sediment issue is a result of possibly climate change, because we're getting these more severe climatic events. Whether you call it weather or whether you call it climate change, I don't really care. It's just that when we've modified the land so much that it doesn't hold water, it causes so much water to flume down the Clun that it just washes away a lot of the riverbank, which adds a lot of sediment. So that comes off the land as well. So the land that used to be under grass, where we had limited soil mobility, so the grass locks up the soil, but when we get lots of potatoes growing on top of the sack and maize, and a rainfall event that we had about a month ago, we had kilotons of soil washed into the river. There's no doubt about it. So,
thinking about the poultry units, the impact they're having on things like the freshwater pearl mussel is there may be a connection with additional silt, although it might be slightly more convoluted relationship in that you might have an AD unit and they're growing maize to feed the AD unit as well, and the AD unit's attached to a poultry unit. So there may be a sediment angle, and they're also generating a lot of manure, and therefore they might choose to grow more crops, which may mean there's more sediment. But is it mainly the nutrient issue that would be the concern with the poultry unit?
Yes, we're probably in a situation in the Clun with nutrient overload in terms of the natural background levels for what pearl mussel want. That might not be the situation outside of the Clun, but because the Clun has the nutrient management plan for the Clun, have you come across that?
I've got the one for the Y.
Right, there's one for the Clun as well.
There's a specific one for the Clun. Okay, so I can follow that up.
So the nutrient management plan for the Clun is set very, very low thresholds. I think it's 0.001 milligrams per litre of phosphate. I can't remember the figure for nitrate, but anyway, the threshold has been set at levels which should encourage juvenile pearl mussel recruitment. At the moment, it's higher than that. Some of the phosphate issues are being addressed by the fact that Severn Trent Water are upgrading their sewage treatment works in the Clun catchment, but it's only half the picture. The other half of the picture is what's being applied to the land. And you have to forgive me, but I'm not a soil scientist, but I just know one of the easiest ways to get rid of your poultry manure is to spread it onto your land. It's costly to transport. After all, it's free fertiliser as well. So why would you not just spread it? And hopefully I'm not doing anyone a disservice there, but I get the impression that's the way it's disposed of. The problem is, because there's so many pathways between the land and the river, the land could be underdrained, the land could have ditches alongside it, the land could run to a highway, which then runs to the highway gully system, which then discharges into the river. So there's multiple pathways by which runoff can get into the river, and along with the runoff composes of sediment and the nutrients that are bound to the sediment. Some nutrients may well stay bound to sediment and flush through the system, or just settle into the sediment. But some nutrients, because they're water soluble, will cause these peaks in nutrient levels.
So you mentioned eutrophication. Is that when you actually get an algal bloom, or is that a higher level of eutrophy?
Well, it will encourage algal bloom. Another thing that encourages algal bloom is an excess of sunlight. But this is one of the problems we've got with the clone, particularly the bottom end of the clone, where the pearl mussel are located, which is where the most intensive agriculture is practiced, but also where we've got the greatest loss of riverbank alder, which shades the riverbank. Right. So with that loss of shade, and a loss of shade causes rising temperature. So with increased amount of sediment and nutrient, loss of shade, then we get these algal blooms. Now, the algal blooms they reduce the amount of oxygen that's available in the water, which stresses freshwater pearl mussels. So the adults will clam up, and if they clam up for a long time, they can succumb.
They can die, and obviously fish also.
Fish are stressed as well, yeah. So again, I think if we lose trees from a riverbank, that probably causes the temperature rise by a couple of degrees. On top of since the Industrial Revolution, I mean, we may well have had a couple of degree rise in temperature. Again, you need to research that yourself. But so we could be looking at 4-degree rise in temperature over the last couple of 100 years. On top of that, future climate change events, which predicted, anything between 2 and 5 degrees by 2080, I think, is it? So all these things combine together. So it's not one single thing. We can't say it's nutrients that are killing pearl mussel off. It's just one of many things. But you need to look at it from a pearl mussel point of view. You need all these things to be at their natural levels for a pearl mussel to thrive in the river clan. And
the algal bloom incidents, do they get monitored, reported, logged, anything like that?
I don't think so. I mean, the Environment Agency do periodic monitoring of the river for water framework directive reasons. So the Clun catchment, you probably know this already, is broken down into water bodies. So I think you've got something like 7 water bodies in the Clun. You can look at that on something called Catchment Data Explorer. And then it'll give you the reasons for that water body meeting or failing Water Framework Directive, and the target that they've set for meeting the Framework Directive.
I was just wondering, because I wasn't quite sure how often algal blooms, the sort of incidence of eutrophication, how common that is or how much of an issue it is. I mean, I picked up references to it way down in the Y and how it affects fishing and various things. I just wasn't quite sure how much it was happening right up this end of the...
Well, I've seen it frequently on the Clun. I've seen it on the Corve. I've seen it on very minor water courses where the dilution factor is not great, so where we get an awful lot of animal waste entering a river, because animals tend to sort of hang around water as well, where water's not being fenced off. This bucolic scene that you see in many of the sort of
Yeah.
18th century paintings like the Hay Wain with, and